Hello and welcome back to this damn full idealistic crusade. This video will be a review of the newly released 25th anniversary edition of R.E.M's New Adventures in HiFi. Still got the little wrapping so I can try and show the hype sticker some. Because of course, like some of their other 25th releases, once you take the wrapping off, you have this wonderful, very stark rendition of the original art, but without any of the text over it. This is done in the same book style format as some of their others, and they've all varied in size. So this one is a little bigger than the monster set, which I've got right here. So you can see when you put all the R.E.M. Deluxe editions and anniversary editions together on a shelf, they're all over the place in terms of size. This is, of course, the Super Deluxe edition, at least I think that's the terminology. So this is including the both the 2 CDs from the 2 CD edition, so the remastered album, the B-sides and rarities disc 2, plus it includes the third disc, which is a Blu-ray, which I'll go over the contents of that, but the primary factors, it includes high-res stereo versions of the new remaster and a high-res 5.1 mix. So this was released by Craft Recordings, who has been who took over the R.E.M. catalog some years ago and has done the past couple of 25th anniversary reissues. The band has been doing each album at a time once it hits that milestone, starting with Murmur back a number of years ago. And once Kraft took over, they started doing a little bit more elaborate box set presentations. And I have to admit, the past couple ones have been pretty good in terms of the extras included and new materials and things. And of course, I make no secret, R.E.M. is my favorite band of all time, has been that way since childhood. I am a complete R.E.M. nerd, so I put extra focus into digging into a new anniversary release when it comes out. And I'm always curious to see how it will stack up in terms of the remaster compared to the original releases and other versions. And unfortunately, as is the case with pretty much every reissue nowadays from the past 20 years or more, the vast majority of the time the remaster is nowhere near as good as the original and worthless and hit with loudness compression and sounds inferior to earlier releases or the original release. The R.E.M. remaster started out that way. All the IRS era albums that were remastered on the anniversary editions are terrible. They're hit with loudness compression. The worst is probably Fables of the Reconstruction, which actually has audible clipping in it. It's the loudness is so bad. And for all the IRS albums, the original US vinyl is the way to go. It sounds better and superior than any other version that I'm aware of. And those are my preferred versions and ways to listen to the IRS albums. Once you hit the Warner years, the original CDs are very plentiful, and they only started to get loud towards the mid-90s, and with Monster and New Adventures, which are still good. You know, they're not ruined by loudness. Loudness compression and the loudness wars didn't really become a major problem until the very end of the 90s, start of the 2000s. So Up still sounds fine on the original CD. It's really Reveal as the first R.E.M. album on the original CD release that is noticeably louder and has much lower dynamic range scores. So in terms of New Adventures, it is an album that was recorded on and off the road using sound checks and using studio recording time as well. Once the process of the Monster Tour was finished and the various attempts at the new songs were pulled together, they then went into various studios in different cities and tried to patch together an album. The idea was to create an on-the-road type concept album, hence the artwork being from actually on the road, and to give a sort of document time capsule idea of where the band was at the time, and to be a new challenge, as any band needs to do. Again, I have to preface all this that, you know, I am a gigantic R.E.M. fanboy and I love all the albums, and I can't really rank them. I love all of them, but if you did have to choose the one that is probably their greatest artistic achievement, and the one that has so many different themes, and every song is beyond simply being a song on an album, but means so much more and is such a a mature, again, artistic statement. It is New Adventures in Hi-Fi. I don't think it's any stretch to call this the band's best album, in terms of it being not just great music, but actually great deep meaning that you're able to reflect on, and the songs grow over the years in terms of their impact and what they mean for you. But also, if I had to name the greatest album ever made, and again, I am biased because I love the band so dearly, for me, it is New Adventures in Hi-Fi. I do think this is the greatest record ever made. If I had to choose one album to take on a desert island, it would be this, and I'd try and squeeze the Who's Quadrophenia in there as well. And I don't know what it says about me that's, probably my two favorite records by my two favorite bands of all time are both extremely dark and have stark black and white covers. But anyway, that just meant that I was so looking forward to the New Adventures box set for years. I couldn't wait to see what demos would come out, and I was so excited to maybe finally be able to hear some of the working versions of other songs. Due to this process, they did make many different attempts at some of the different songs, over sound checks, and then on some they tried to see if they could do them any better at the studio at the end of things, and they found they really couldn't. So that's why the album is a mixture of recording techniques and styles. So it's never going to be as impressive, say, as an album recorded 100% entirely in a studio on multi-track equipment with the best possible technical precision, because this album wasn't designed that way. But it has a perfect flow in terms of the track order. I know some people think it's a little bit too long because it was in the CD era and it clocks in a little over an hour. It's a double album on a vinyl release. But I think it's that way for a reason and for a purpose. I don't think it overstays its welcome at all. But anyway, that's why I was so excited to get New Adventures on this release. However, unlike the previous couple of releases, especially Monster, for example, which again I have here in the deluxe set, Monster received entire discs of demos and rarities, plus an entire reimagining of the album by the original producer Scott Litt. He did a brand new mix of the whole album, and it's sort of a reimagined version of the record. I don't like any of it at all, but it's a nice inclusion, and it's some interesting ideas, so that was included as well. So when you come to the New Adventures release, and this is where I get into the unfortunate negatives of this, and I think it's going to be a real struggle if you're a diehard fan to even justify purchasing this, because there's really not that much new material here. I don't know if it was vetoed by somebody, or it was, I don't know if it happened because of the pandemic, and that meant it was just harder to get everybody together and go through vaults and approve things and look for demos and rarities and such. But this is primarily stuff that you will already have if you're a diehard fan, or you'll know of or be aware of. So in terms of the extra contents, again, disc 1 is the remastered album. You move on to disc 2, and what it is it's all of the B-sides and tracks that were included on the CD single releases for the singles from the album. There were 3 released here in the U.S. Unfortunately, the 4th, How the West Was Won and Where It Got Us, was only released on CD. I know it was Germany, and I think it may have also been Japan, so it's a quite difficult CD single to come by, but the tracks have been released in other places as well. So basically, it takes the bonus tracks from those 4 single releases, puts them all here, along with the alternate version of Leave, which was included on the A Life Less Ordinary soundtrack. So you can also, if you've got that soundtrack, you've got the alternate version of Leave, and that was also released on some other releases the band has done. So that's the entire disc 2 of B-sides and rarities, so it is all previously released material. It's nothing new. And unfortunately, again, that's it for the CDs. Then you move on to the Blu-ray. And that's the difference between this deluxe package and getting the 2 CD set. So you may think, oh, well, hopefully there's some real goodies on the Blu-ray. So again, in addition to having the album in high-res stereo and 5.1, how it lists things. You have the music videos, which it's great to have them all in one place, and they are synchronized to the new remastered versions of the high-res on the Blu-ray disc, so you can watch the music video and listen to the 5.1 version if you want. So those are all here. They do look better than the old release on the DVD audio disc, of course. But then in addition to that, the two primary things you're looking at on the Blu-ray in terms of extras, and what is listed as the outdoor projections, listed as being recorded in 1986 and being in 5 different cities. That's a bit misleading, unfortunately, because what that is I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. It starts and ends with a sort of photo slideshow, I believe, of some more of Michael Stipe's photos from the sessions for taking the photos from the album, but synchronized to some of the songs. And then it immediately goes into some live performances from the Monster Tour, where they did road test and work out some of these songs in some of the sets. But what it is, it's actually selections from the road movie concert film. This was done on the last 3 nights of the tour in Atlanta and comprised into this video release. It was released on tape, Laserdisc, and eventually this DVD. So it's not even the whole show. It's just random selections from road movie. It's kind of bizarre. I don't know why this was included, because of course, if you jump back to the Monster release, Monster has, on this anniversary release, it has the entire road movie concert film on the Blu-ray disc. So basically, like 5 or 6 tracks were taken out of the Blu-ray release on the Monster set and put on the Blu-ray of New Adventures. So that, I don't know why that happened, but that's all that extra is. So if you have the Monster release or you have road movie already, you've already got these. Now, of course, in comparing the versions, road movie was remixed into 5.1 for the Monster release. That carries here as well, so you get stereo and 5.1 options. Even though it's a limited video recording, the video quality is much better in the HD rendering than the old versions. However, the audio of the HD versions is mastered a lot louder, even the stereo version. So unfortunately, the road movie sounds much better on this DVD, because this DVD has PCM audio. It's PCM stereo, and it doesn't have the loudness compression. So unfortunately, for road movie, you get much better picture quality and the whole thing on the Monster box, but much better audio on the old DVD or Laserdisc release. So, and then again, on the New Adventures box, you just get some random selections from the Blu-ray presentation that was already available on the Monster set. So, again, that's not really an extra, because you already have the whole thing. So I don't know what was up with that. Then you go into the main draw of this set in terms of the actual bonuses. It's the original EPK release made for New Adventures in Hi-Fi to promote it, and you get to see some great shots of the band in studio and working on songs, and then you get some interesting talking head bits with the band members and Scott Litt and everybody talking about the album as it is in progress and hasn't been released yet, so you get to see their excitement about the new material. But that's been previously released on the DVD audio disc and, of course, to promo stations back in the day. But that was edited down to about 16 minutes. This one is the unedited 30-minute version. So what that means is you get to see more in-studio footage and more stuff that was not used in the original edit. It does kind of run a little long, because it's, again, basically like the rough edit. So there are just, you'll just see the camera run a little bit. But if you're a diehard fan of the band, that's gold. You don't care that you're just getting to look at the guys in the studio for a while, or get to see them when they're interviewing Michael Stipe doing the slate-ins and stuff. So that's really a nice thing. And it's also a new scan. If you compare it to what's on the DVD audio disc, that's obviously dubbed from some old tape source. And this, you can even tell the color is much better, the detail's much better, even though, again, it's an old source and limited. I think it might actually be a mixture of video and 16mm footage in some places, but I could be wrong on that. So that was really rewarding and nice to see. And I'll also mention What's really infuriating about it is if you listen closely to the samples of the songs they include, it sounds like there might be some demo mixes and rough mixes of some of the songs. I could be wrong because it's only various segments of songs spread throughout, and they're, of course, doing studio recording sessions and such, but it does sound like some of the song samples included in the EPK are maybe demos or rough mixes. So you can get a sort of idea of what the demos and rarities CD disc that is not here and was not made could be like. So that, unfortunately, is a bit frustrating and infuriating. So that's it in terms of the extras. That is all you're getting in here. So then you turn to the packaging, which, again, it's this nice bound book, which I do really like. I like the idea of sort of stripping the text away from the original cover. And, of course, you do have to hang on to the hype sticker to have what was originally on there. You open it up, and it does have beautiful photos. I will say, again, that these photos have all been rescanned. And, again, even the cover photo is higher quality because it's been rescanned. So it does have noticeable more detail than the original CD and vinyl release. So I do like that Michael's original photos have been reproduced. And then the liner notes are pretty good. You get an essay, and then you get some band input interviews. So that's included in here as well. And this is primarily the major bonus in terms of physical terms of getting the deluxe release. So that lasts for a few pages, and then you immediately go into nice lyric sheets for each song. So each song gets the original lyrics with the matching design of the original CD booklet of the original CD release, and then, again, each song gets its own dedicated page with photo. And the credits. And then we come into part of the absolute infuriating bit of these deluxe releases, not just from R.E.M, but in general. Anytime you have a deluxe music release from a band that's an archival release with demos and rarities or a Blu-ray disc or something, they always insist on trying to make you murder the disc. This is the same thing that's on the Monster box, but that's, of course, much smaller. So here you have these flat pages, and as you can see already, the disc itself is just sticking up, and it's actually exposed on the back side, as you can see there. I don't know why they do this. It is beyond frustrating. And also, these pages have a sort of locking mechanism to them. It is extremely difficult to get these discs in and out. And you'll feel like a little click when they want to start sliding in and out. So you have to actually, put your fingers all over the disc itself, and you have to trying to work it out. The CDs are okay because they are thinner. And it's also foam inside, if you look here. So it is better, I've seen, than some, but this is no way to package discs, especially in a box set like this. I wish manufacturers would stop doing this. This is nuts. And as you can see, again, the discs always remain partially exposed. So you're going to get damaged fingerprints, dust, scratches trying to get them in and out, or just sitting on the shelf. But the real infuriating bit is part 3, where the Blu-ray is. Because Blu-rays are a lot thicker than CDs, this is really difficult to get in and out. I tried not to, but I got fingerprint smudges all over the disc surface trying to get it in and out. So I would recommend be very, very careful. They do get easier to use once you get it out that first time, but trying to get this disc out the first time was a real pain, and I had to struggle for a long time to not actually scratch up the disc itself. So that is it for the actual packaging. That's what you're getting in this release for the 3-disc version. Now we get to the actual album itself and the remastering process. Again, as I've said before, I don't think any of the R.E.M remasters to date have been an improvement on their original releases. Starting with the Warner era releases, once they started with Green and switched over to Craft Recordings, I think the first really decent and well-done R.E.M anniversary box set was for Out of Time. That was a nice multi-disc release with demos, rarities, and a Blu-ray disc with high-res options. Automatic for the People had another good one as well. And both of those remasters, they were a little bit louder. They had slightly different EQ, but they didn't wreck or ruin anything. But those were already well-mastered albums to begin with, and did not need any remastering as far as I was concerned. So I do think they are still not as good as the original CDs or original vinyl or the DVD audio discs from 2005. Moving on to Monster, that was already a louder album to begin with, and the remaster did unfortunately make it a little bit louder, but again, didn't wreck anything or change anything. So I do still think the original is better. I think the original vinyl is probably best of all because it has a little bit of extra warmth to it, but the original vinyl is very rare, and most people are not going to be able to experience that. So then when you get to HiFi, and it was probably going to be a little bit louder in terms of dynamic range and the overall score, which it is. On the dynamic range meter, it's about a point lower than the original CD release, which I still have here. This is my much beloved copy that I've had since I bought it as a kid, and practically worn this thing out. Of course, the original CD disc inside it. And of course, I began comparing, as I do, with every version that I have. So compared it to, of course, the original CD, the 2005 DVD-A, which is long out of print, which has the high-res stereo version and the Elliot Scheiner 5.1 mix in high-res. And this is actually the 5.1 mix you have on the Blu-ray. It carries over. So they reused the Elliot Scheiner mix. He did all the 5.1 mixes for the R.E.M. DVD-As, which all came out in 2005. These are all nice releases in the digipack format. The first disc is the original CD replicated, and these are all very difficult to find now and can get very pricey. I've been chipping away at it over the years, and I've been able to get most of them. I've got pretty much everything but the DVD-A for Document, and the Warner one I'm missing is out of time. But for the most part, these are slight upgrades in dynamic range for the original stereo mix, and you get the 5.1 mix. I've never been a fan of the 5.1 mixes for the R.E.M. albums, though, because they do lose iconic elements in the mix, and there are some 5.1 gimmicks. In particular, on this album, when you listen to the 5.1 mix of Leave, the iconic wailing siren that never stops, in the 5.1 mix, it literally rotates around you the whole time. So it doesn't stay locked in front as it does on the stereo mix. It's a very gimmicky thing. So it starts left channel, center, right channel, rear surround, left surround, and it just constantly circles around. And while I get the idea, it is a little gimmicky. So if you ever wanted the 5.1 mix on here, you like the 5.1 mix, that's what's on the Blu-ray. It's not a brand new mix. Automatic for the People got a remix in Atmos that was brand new on its Blu-ray. So it's interesting to see some of the Blu-rays go back to the Elliot Scheiner 5.1 mixes. I, of course, have 2 of the physical CD maxi singles. I don't have all 4 of them. Again, the 4th for How the West Was Won and Where It Got Us was never released in the U.S., but you can get those tracks in other compilations. But so I have 2 of them, and they were done in this sort of snapper case design style, which I actually kind of like. It has some of the same imagery that's on the box set. And of course, I was lucky enough to get a copy of the original vinyl release, which I have behind me. I'll take down. So this is the original 1996 vinyl pressing, a double vinyl release. And of course, this was when vinyl was practically non-existent. I think R.E.M. had it in their contract that every album had to get a vinyl release at some point. But all the Warner era original pressings for their albums are exceptionally rare and usually cost a great deal of money. I was able to get this copy sealed a number of years ago, thankfully before the vinyl revival started. But unfortunately, because it was sealed, one of the discs, LP2, has a little bit of warpage, which is unfortunate, but it's not terrible. This does have a warmer, more open sound than the original CD or the DVD-A, but of course, being 1996, it's not the best vinyl pressing in the world, so it does have some sibilance. It is known as a torture test for a lot of cartridges among the vinyl community, particularly How the West Was Won and Where It Got Us and some other tracks on here. But it's also a bit of a noisy pressing, unfortunately, so the sonic improvements, while they're great and you will have to deal with some imperfections on almost every copy of this, because again, it was a vinyl release in 1996. Not only is it rare, not only does it have some sonic improvements, but it's also got some defects that will be frustrating, and they're going to stay there no matter what level of cartridge you have. You could have a $20,000 cartridge, and you're still going to have issues because it was a 1996 vinyl release. So, needless to say, I've done a lot of comparisons. And of course, being REM and being especially New Adventures, and I'd looked forward to this release for years, wondering what the rarities and the demos could be like. I was, definitely going to take some time and go through the releases. So, the unfortunate part of what I discovered when I was listening to this, I noticed immediately that the mid range seemed a bit different, and it was a little bit clearer on the actual album proper. And I've talked with others in music forums. The general consensus is it seems like maybe some of the compressor limiting on the original mastering isn't there, so there's a little bit more breadth to the mid range. But it definitely seemed like it didn't have the same attack on the material that even the original CD did, and it is a bit louder too. But I wasn't able to really define what I was looking at until I pulled all the tracks into Audacity so I could look at the waveforms. And I'm going to include these here and go through these very quickly. But as you can clearly see, if you look at this in any sort of audio editor, the loudness compression that's been added to the new release greatly reduces the peaks and valleys that can exist in the waveform. So just looking at the original 1996 CD compared to the new 2021 CD, the difference is striking. Nothing is cut off, thankfully. Unfortunately, I did find the DVD-A, which is a really tricky format to use, so I don't listen to it often. I finally figured out a way to actually get the actual high-res stereo out of the weird MLP format, so then I could just bring it into Audacity and look at the waveform. But the DVD-A actually does have some clipping in it. I don't think it was as carefully mastered. Whereas the new CD, the 2021 disc, and the Blu-ray, it's mastered louder than the original CD, but they did at least make sure there is no audible clipping of the signal itself. But when you look at the waveform, you can clearly see at first glance, it looks like what is typically known as a brick wall mastering, because everything has been raised in volume to the point that it literally looks like a brick wall. But when you zoom in closely, you'll notice that the peaks and valleys are still there, but the dynamic range loss is such that those peaks and valleys are far less than the original release. So you're actually losing high end and low end impact, and that's what I was noticing. The new release doesn't have the same attack on the material because the dynamic range loss is enormous, and it's actually far greater than you realize simply looking at the dynamic range meter score, which is a 7 overall for the new release, compared to, I believe it's an 8 overall for the original release. So on paper it doesn't look like it's that much different, but when you look at the actual waveforms, it is a pretty dramatic difference. And again, it was also interesting to note that the DVD-A disc from 2005, looking at the high-res stereo option, it does have audible clipping where there actually is clipping off of the waveform levels when it hits too high or too low, and that information is just gone, and it actually leaves an audible little click in there. But it's also got some of the trademarks of the new 2021 disc in terms of being a little bit more open in the mid-range. So I guess you could call the DVD-A 2005 high-res stereo like a version 1.0 of the 2021 version. And then you come to the Blu-ray and you think that, oh, the high-res Blu-ray, the 5.1 is the same as the DVD-A, it's the same mix, but you'd think the high-res stereo would have more dynamic range and not be as loud as the CD. Well, you would be right, and looking at the waveform, it's dramatically less in volume. But then you look at the waveform more closely and you see it's got the same jacked levels. It's exactly the same. The only difference is it's mastered quieter. So it's obviously a quieter track, but it's got the same loudness compression already baked in it. So it's pointless. It's really funny when you look at it in Audacity or any waveform editor, because basically all they did was they took the CD master and they reduced the volume by a couple dBs. That's it. It's got the same levels. So yeah, basically the Blu-ray high-res audio gives you the CD audio quieter. I mean, that's it. That is literally it. And I think the most damning thing to look at is I also captured my original vinyl. And again, it's not the best pressing in the world, but you're able to look at the waveform, which I'm going to include here as well, and stacked up against the new Blu-ray. These are the most compatible in terms of the volume levels they were mastered at. but you can see very clearly the levels comparing the original 1996 vinyl release and the new 2021 high-res stereo Blu-ray. Again, the volume levels are about the same. That's why the waveform size is pretty much identical on both. But you can see the difference clearly in the peaks and valleys that are clearly visible in the signal on the original vinyl release, which is probably the most dynamic version, and the new 2021 high-res Blu-ray option, and just how that is gone. So yeah, it's very unfortunate. I cannot recommend the remaster of this album. There are some positives. Some people like the new version, and the new vinyl release is apparently really well done. A lot of people are raving about it, but again, a lot of people simply wanted to get the album on vinyl and could never get the unobtainable 1996 original. Now, the new one apparently is pressed really well. It was also cut by one of the great engineers. So I am interested now that I've heard some positive feedback. I always wait on vinyl releases because you never know how well they're going to be pressed in the modern age, and most are not pressed very well at all, and you don't know who mastered them. But, it does have a great engineer. But my fear is that it's using the probably the Blu-ray source master of this new remaster. So I don't know if that stuff is going to be baked in. It very probably is, and that's going to be really unfortunate. So basically, you're going to be looking at the new vinyl for some extra dynamic range, maybe a well-pressed record, and for actually getting the album on vinyl. Again, a lot of people are really happy with that release, but I didn't go for it because I was waiting for new reviews, and also I've not gotten any of the remastered vinyl releases because I presumed, and from what I've been able to tell, they are just vinyl versions of the new remaster. But they are, at least all the versions released by Kraft, starting with Out of Time and Automatic and Monster, they are well pressed. So they are good for what they are, but I can't really recommend them either, simply because they are using the remastered source audio. But I am very curious about New Adventures in terms of the vinyl release and the mastering and everything. So I'm trying to. I've asked around. I'm hoping somebody can at least capture a song and post a picture of what the waveform looks like, because I'd be very curious to see if it's got any more information than what's on the new remastered CD or Blu-ray release, because in the vinyl mastering process it is possible that a higher gen source was used without that stuff baked in, or there's some different EQ going on. So it'll be very interesting to look at that. So I might break my rule and get the new vinyl release to check it out for myself, because it is possible it could be better than the rather disappointing Blu-ray high-res and the disappointing CD audio. So unfortunately, this is an extremely disappointing release, not just for the fact that there is no new material, there's no demos, there's no rarities, and of course I looked forward to this thing for years, wondering and dreaming about what could be in the extras discs on here. Again, I don't know if that was a conscious decision or if that was affected by the pandemic, or how that happened and why this didn't have the extras, say, on what was on the previous Monster anniversary release, which was went far beyond my expectations of what could be on there. So, and also I should mention that I also checked the B-sides tracks on CD on the other CDs. So all the tracks on CD2 I compared to my single releases. They were also hit with loudness. Not quite as bad, but it is a noticeable difference. So even on the B-sides and rarities, I do think the original releases are significantly better. I've also posted a waveform comparison there of the original CD single compared to the same track on CD2. And of course, it's a mixture of live and studio recordings. So this is one of the studio tracks. But that's unfortunate as well, so I can't recommend either CD1 or CD2. And in terms of the Blu-ray, the high res is out. I can't recommend that either. The 5.1 is the same as the DVD audio, so if you like that type of 5.1 mix, then you can get that here, but I don't really recommend that either because I'm not a fan of that particular mix. The videos are here, but those have been available before. And then you've got clips from Road Movie, which is available in its entirety other places and has better audio on the DVD and Laserdisc. And then the real draw of this, outside of the packaging and the photos and the liner notes, is the uncut EPK from apparently a new source scan. So what you're buying this for as an REM diehard fan is the 30-minute uncut EPK. That's it. That's the only thing you're getting new here, plus the nice packaging. So yeah, that's extremely disappointing. I mean, I make no secret of it, being such a fan and looking forward to this for so long. For me, this is the most disappointing music reissue I've ever bought. I don't know exactly why I bought it outside of obligation and being this probably being my favorite record of all time. And uh, I mean, at least I got the EPK. You know, that's it was a great watch, but I don't know if I wanted to pay $40 just for a uncut, rough EPK with some extra footage of everybody hanging out and some music snippets. But that's pretty much what you're getting in this release. So. I wanted to make a video about this because I had to do far more detailed research than I thought I was going to have to do. And the new remaster is a bit deceptive because it does have apparently some less compression going on in the mid-range, and it does sound a bit airier and clearer on most of the album tracks, but also it loses some attack and some detail. And then when you go into looking at the actual waveforms, you can clearly see why. It's not just that it loses some dynamic range, it loses a lot of things, and it does have some of the tendencies of brick wall mastering. So unfortunately, that also compounded with finding out the DVD audio disc actually has some clipping in it, and the original 1996 vinyl release not being the greatest pressing in the world, even though it does have some added warmth to it, and it does sound great when you don't have to deal with noise and sibilance and mid 90s vinyl issues. The scary thing, the sad thing, the overall best sounding version of New Adventures in Hi-Fi is still the original 1996 Red Book CD that you can buy in a music store for cheap. And you should have this. You should have had this for years. You should listen to this billions of times. But overall, this is still the best sounding version of the album, the original CD. So that's it's unfortunate that there's not anything better. I do think the original vinyl does improve in some ways. It's a little bit warmer, but you have to deal with so many mid-90s issues in terms of the pressing quality not being the greatest in the world that it kind of undoes some of those benefits, and you don't have to deal with any of those problems on the CD. The CD also has a little bit of clarity where the vinyl doesn't, so it's a trade-off. It'd be great if you can own both, but the vinyl is very unobtainable in terms of the original pressing. And of course, you can get the original CD here for a couple bucks at most any music store. It belongs in everyone's collection, even if you're not a fan of the band or if you haven't come to it before. And that really, I think, is the benefit of these anniversary reissues. Hi-Fi is the album where the band's peak of popularity really started to wane. They really hit that with Out of Time and Automatic for the People really unexpectedly. Then Monster came out and they did the World Tour, which is their first major tour since the 1988-89 Green World Tour. So it got the band out there. But then, Monster didn't have the same critical reception or the same audience reception at first. And then New Adventures in Hi-Fi comes out. It's much more challenging. The first single was How the West Was Won and Where It Got Us, and that really put a lot of people off. So this album did not sell as well, and it was not talked about. It was not promoted in the same way the previous albums had been. And the band never had the same peak level of popularity again, especially in the US. Their later albums would become much more popular and critically regarded in Europe, which is a shame because they're great albums, and it's a shame they're not really known and discussed and loved over here in the US as they are in Europe. But anyway, I think it's really important that New Adventures has gotten this new release and it's gotten the album back out there. It's gotten people talking about it. We've gotten the glowing critical reappraisal reviews of the anniversary box set. And again, that's been the best aspect of the anniversary reissues, is getting the material back out there, getting people to look at it, getting them on Spotify, and getting new listeners to actually come to these albums and be able to appreciate them all these years later. So at least it's gotten New Adventures back out there, but unfortunately, I do think the best sounding version is still the original CD, paired with the original vinyl if you can ever find a version. And I will check out the new vinyl release at some point in the near future just to see if it's any improvement. But unfortunately, the new box set is really just, I think it's for diehards only. If you're gonna buy the 2 disc CD set, you might as well go ahead and get this because it's about $10 more, and you'll get the music in high res, plus the videos, plus the EPK and the nicer packaging. But yeah, basically, diehard fans, you're paying $40 for a 30-minute EPK video. So that's really unfortunate, and it's very sad that, again, what I think is the best album I've ever heard has such a disappointing deluxe anniversary reissue. But I know that's not going to be the opinion of everyone. I'm glad it did finally come out, and that it did get a fancier package, and it did get a Blu-ray disc, and I can't wait to see what's going to come out with the Up anniversary reissue, because that album is criminally neglected and just never praised, and it should be, because it is a great record. But I wish this was better. I wish this had demos and rarities, because this is an album that should, just from the nature of the recordings alone, and all the road recordings and the developing the songs over concert set list and performances and sound checks and studio work. But unfortunately, that was just I don't know why, but it didn't happen. So that's where I am with the 25th anniversary release, the deluxe edition of R.E.M's New Adventures in Hi-Fi, which for me is the best record I've ever heard. I just wish, I just wish this new anniversary reissue actually sounded good, but unfortunately it doesn't. So anyway, I know that was a bit more convoluted than I originally intended. I was going to do this review a long time ago, but I had to do more research and more digging and more looking at waveforms and such. But I thought it was important to do, because I hadn't seen anybody else go over it, and being such an R.E.M nerd, I this is what I do every time a new release comes out. So I just wish this was better. Wish I had something positive to say, but unfortunately I don't. Again, the packaging is kind of nice, and you get the uncut EPK, and that's what you're getting for your $40, unfortunately. But definitely leave comments below if you've got any version of the new release, and whether you liked it or you didn't, or your own thoughts on the anniversary reissues, or especially if you've gotten the new vinyl release. I would love to hear your own opinions, because it is very necessary to hear people's playtest opinions of new vinyl pressings, because modern vinyl is so all over the place. But I am very curious to see if that's any better than the disappointing CD and Blu-ray mastering. I'm most disappointed in the high-res Blu-ray, because it's more dynamic, because it's lower volume, but it's still the same crappy remaster with jacked levels. So that's a real shame. I bought this because it came with the Blu-ray, if I'm honest, and because I love this album. But yeah, that's where I stand with this, and I wanted to put this video together. I know I glow about the album. The album, is incredible. It's a true work of art. It stood the test of time and then some. But unfortunately, it has not gotten the deluxe package release that it really deserves. So again, that's unfortunately where I am with this box set. But I can't even recommend it, really. Again, if you're going to buy any version of this, and you were going to buy the 2 CD set, I do recommend going ahead and getting the whole package. If you don't have any of these materials already, then yes, this is a fine way to get them all in one place, and you will get the full EPK on the Blu-ray disc. But yeah, outside of that, because the sound quality just isn't there, and again, the original CD is better. Like, that's just that's just silly, but that's the scenario we find ourselves in with the vast majority of reissues and remasters. So that's not surprising on the album remaster, but I just wish there were extras enough to justify recommending this or purchasing this, which unfortunately there aren't. But fans and completists will be buying this anyway, and again, a lot of people have just gone straight for the new vinyl release. So at least the album is back out there, and there is a vinyl release that you can purchase for about $30 and enjoy on your turntable finally. So at least there is that. I know normally I do primarily film content on this channel, but I will occasionally tiptoe into music, and this is really probably the first more in-depth music review that I've done, but it was such an important thing for me, and this is such an important album for me that I felt it was beyond necessary to do. And of course, I'm an R.E.M fanboy, so I have to do it anyway. So in closing, make of this what you will. Definitely check out at least some version of the new anniversary release, whichever you decide to go with. And here's hoping the 25th anniversary package for Up will be much better than the extremely disappointing box set for New Adventures in Hi-Fi.